G'day, mate. 40 here. I finished watching the new Martin Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. It's absolutely haunting about the Osage Indians in Oklahoma who, through no virtue of their own, became the capital, the richest people in the world in the 19 teens, 1920s, when oil was discovered on their reservation. And as a result of, through no virtue of their own, that group became about the richest group in the world. That they attracted all these predators who wanted to come get a piece of the pie. And let's say that the movie is accurately portraying history, then that some of the most established citizen in town, the one who's best known for being friendly and helpful to the Osage Indians, was also masterminding a scheme of getting their various these white relatives to marry into the Osage tribe and get themselves designated as heirs, and then start bumping off the Indians so that they could get the money for themselves. That's a grim story, and I'm reflecting on my two blog posts, Rules for Life and my rules for decoding reality. So one rule for life is that a fool and his money are soon parted, and extension of that, a foolish people and their money are soon parted. So whatever you think of the Arabs, right? So most of my friends are Orthodox Jews, not the most Arab-friendly people you'll ever meet. You got to hand it to the Arabs; they have held onto their wealth. Right? A lot of other peoples have gotten rich, and the Arabs have become rich through no virtue of their own. It's just that enormous quantities of oil have been found in their lands, such as Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia's gotten enormously rich, and they've held on to that wealth. And they use their power to pursue their own interests. So you can't really say the Arabs are foolish people, because they've held on to their wealth and their power and they use it. As opposed to the Osage Indians, who got incredibly rich, and then it just largely disappeared. They were just ripe for the picking. And I'm haunted by one dynamic in the film. And that is that the person you marry is the one who is betraying you. Like, I've had the experience of my back going out on me and being absolutely helpless. So I would have a nightmare of being married to someone or close to someone, dependent on someone. And my back goes out and they do the equivalent of laugh at me or plot against me. Or I've had more than my normal share of illness throughout my life. Now, what if the people closest to me were somehow participating in that? Like, I was predisposed to a life of poor health, uh, perhaps because of the vegetarian diet that I was raised with. Right, the vegetarian diet was supposed to be so healthy. Right, it hobbled me, and because I unquestionably carried on parts of my childhood, including my vegetarian diet, it crippled me for 50 years. And, I took that, inherited that, accepted that, believed in that from the people who loved me the most. But it was also what reduced me to the sickbed much of my life. So whenever you form a close relationship, you'll inevitably experience something akin to you desperately need them and they laugh at you. Because no one can always be there and responsive and sensitive to our needs. So I think we all had the experience of like sharing something heartfelt or turning for help to those that we most look for help, and the other party disappointing us, right? Because other people are human, it's inevitable they will disappoint us, and because other people are flawed, often they will perceive their interests being quite contrary to yours. So You may very well be vulnerable, desperately in need. The person you turn to most in the world, you rely on the most, is the one who has the capacity to hurt you the most and will inevitably hurt you, as their priorities will not always be in alignment with what you expect that their priorities should be. But see the husband and wife that are at the center of this movie. Like he's a white guy, damaged, not too smart, returned from World War One, and marries this Indian woman who's not mentally there. Right? She has an executor over her wealth because she's apparently mentally retarded, and so she's incredibly vulnerable to him. He's not too smart. He's incredibly vulnerable to his charismatic, powerful, smart uncle, who tries to devise ways for his family to get rich by bumping off the Indians. And so this Indian woman, the wife, actually has diabetes, and much of that's on her. Like she's given a program of how to maximize her health, and she doesn't follow it. She eats against all instructions, conducts herself against all instructions, and so she has horrible health. And she's utterly dependent on her white husband, who's not the brightest bulb, and largely under the sway of his uncle, who is incentivizing him to perhaps bump off his wife in addition to much of her family to get his hands on their wealth. And the uncle designs it so that this not too smart World War One veteran signs over his wealth to the uncle. As a painful part of reality, the people that we're closest to are the people that we trust the most, need the most, depend on the most, love the most, we're the most genetically related to, often going to be the ones who will inevitably let us down just because all parties here are human, and different individuals have different aims, different values, different gifts. I'm just thinking about what eventually saves the Osage Indians. It's not the Osage Indians, it's not the federal Indians, it's the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover sent some federal agents out. And these largely white guys solve the murders and arrange the prosecution of the murderers and win the prosecution. So it's the outgroup, right? It's the outgroup that's killing the Osage Indians and murdering them. And then it's also another part of the outgroup that comes to their rescue. How did my family and peers on the same vegetarian diet fare? Bernard in the house live. Okay, so they have generally, well, neither my brother or sister are fully vegetarian. Right? They've had my brother actively eats fish, and my sister has not been as strict a vegetarian as I have. So they are very vulnerable, and then that's it, right? In the family, right? My family is a breakaway from everyone we're related to because my parents converted themselves to Adventism and its nutty ideas about vegetarianism. But I think Nathan Koffness has documented quite convincingly the destructive, dangerous components of the vegetarian diet, and how when you raise your kids vegetarian makes them highly unpopular. You're reducing your odds of being able to successfully socialize. In addition, you're just not going to get the nutrients that you need. Like the impaired cognitive, in addition to impaired social development when you're a vegetarian. Bernard grew up on a diet of raw milk, bread, potatoes, and meat. Yeah, and look where he is today. So this week, in addition to watching the Scorsese film, Killers of the Flower Moon, a haunting, depressing story of various white people murders of Osage Indians at the same time as white people are coming save the Osage Indians. The Osage Indians aren't capable of looking after themselves. The foolish people, and they will soon parted. I was watching the PBS Frontline documentary on the Uvalde school shooting, and it was so depressing to see the incompetence of the Uvalde Police Department and the overall law enforcement response. They waited 77 minutes to enter the room where the shooter was. So in that time, kids and teachers bled out and died, right? Because they knew the shooter had a powerful weapon that would pierce their body armor. So they were highly reluctant to go in. And they used the excuse, oh, we need to get a master key to be able to unlock the door. But it turns out the door was unlocked the whole time. So they wait 77 minutes to go in, come up with every excuse under the sun. And one key component is that the victims of the shooting and the purported should-be law enforcement rescuers seem quite closely related. I mean, one law enforcement officer showed up and his wife was in one of the classrooms. It was under threat. And so you would think, and it's your own kin, it's your own people where you share the same religion, nationalities, culture, language, and yet you just stand back. So if you were lying there bleeding on the floor while a mass shooting, would you primarily care whether or not your law enforcement that had showed up to the scene were of your same religion or of your same race or held your political or cultural or religious beliefs? No, you'd primarily want them to be effective. And if you're bleeding out, you wouldn't care if it's someone of a different race, if it religion comes in and saves you. And it's this efficiency challenge where apparently, obviously I'm not a world expert here, but apparently American workers are pretty highly productive. Like they work hard. Americans are pretty efficient. So for all swaths of life, what you most care about is the integrity and efficiency with which people do their tasks. Like when you're driving down the street and there are other drivers coming towards you, what you most care about is that they follow the law. Like you care about that more than what their religion is or what their race is or what their political beliefs are. Right? When you've got a plumbing problem, right? So you have to shut off the water, right? Or your pipes are frozen and splintered and broken. What you most want from your plumber is efficient, honest service. I don't know much about cars, so I have felt incredibly vulnerable throughout my life when I take my car in for servicing. And much of the time I felt like mechanics are taking advantage of my ignorance and just milking me. And so there's rare occasions when I find an honest car mechanic. Do you think I care that much about the race or religion of the car mechanic? No, I'm not going to celebrate that. Or your cable connection, your internet goes down. You want to get it solved. Your computer breaks down. You want to get it solved. You care about efficiency and the honesty and integrity of the person you're dealing with. They're much more than race or religion. They're just such a chillingly, incredibly incompetent response to the Uvalde school shooting by people who are closely related to the victims, just allowing them to plead out. Like I bet those victims would rather people of completely different race, but who are effective and efficient and brave and trained to do their jobs would have shown up. So often, in times of crisis, people desperately want someone who speaks their language. So, California, people who suffer an accident or a setback, and they need help. Like it's really important to them that they, get someone who speaks Spanish. Right? But frequently, what should be more important to them is that the person is skilled and effective and efficient and honest at what they're doing, and can provide the law enforcement of the help that they need. It's hard to believe that homogeneous, highly cohesive, high social trust society like Japan has such dramatically less productive workforce than the United States. Like, why the heck is that happening? Like, why is Japan, for its cohesion and high social trust, why is its workforce so less productive, so less efficient than the United States, where people frequently go to a workplace where they feel very little in common with their fellow workers. I mean, think about our friend Elliot Blatt and his frustrations at work, his alienation, right? When Karl Marx was talking about the alienation of the worker, and he's probably thinking about people like Elliot Blatt. Right? He does not enjoy many of his workplace interactions. It does not seem to provide him with joy, right? And many people go to a workplace where they feel there's nothing in common with their fellow workers. And yet, how out of all that does America develop such a highly productive, relatively efficient, cost-effective workforce compared to a highly cohesive social trust society like Japan? So, in that area of efficiency, America does really well. Thinking of a story from Australia when Japan bombed Darwin during World War II, the Australian officers who were supposed to monitor the radar, they were on smoker, right? They were taking a 10-minute break. So dominant Australian and New Zealand ethos is one of fairness. Dominant American ethos is one of freedom. So there are good sides and bad sides to each ethos. But in Australia, the camaraderie, high social trust and high social cohesion, often goes hand in hand with less efficiency and less productivity. Like during World War II, Australian unions, particularly the dock workers, were frequently going on strike. Right, the country's at war. The country is fighting for its life against Japan, desperately needs materials to carry on the fight. And the dock workers are striking because they've been provided with coffee instead of tea and similar things. And just the bloody mindedness of unions in Australia and Great Britain, and I presume New Zealand too. Like strong unions go hand in hand with some cohesion and social trust and a sense of bonding among workers. But if it leads to such inefficient outcomes, right, there's a significant downside. So people go to work and they're with people like themselves, and that's going to be a happier experience. Like it's jolting when I go back to Australia and I notice the high social trust, social cohesion, the corporate nature of society compared to America, but more of a sense that we're in it together, the easy way that you make friends and mateship and have a sense of community in Australia compared to America, which is much more about isolated individuals trying to be all they can be and be as successful as possible. So that mateship, that social connection feels amazing. But then I got to hand it to America for its level of excellence. So of course I made notes. You think I just produced this string of amazing insights just off the top of my head? What type of school should you go to avoid a school shooting? So one thing I was very impressed with in Australia is the high level of security at Jewish institutions. And that got dramatically upgraded after 9/11. So I went to a Hanukkah event in the park, and there were four security officers. So there were about 100 Jews at the event and four armed security officers. In the United States, you still have countless synagogues that have no security, which just seemed absolutely insane. Now, at a synagogue of any size, of course, you'll have security. But I guess I would assume the likelihood of your school being shot up would approximate the level of violent crime in that community. So, are there any markers of like low crime communities? I think the higher the social trust and social cohesion in that community, the less chance for a school shooting. So, I'm not familiar with many school shootings in Japan. I was stunned after October 7th by the very low level of gun ownership. I think I read this week that only 2% of Israelis are licensed to carry weapons. And I had pictured Israel as a society with a lot more people licensed and permitted to carry weapons, and it just didn't turn out to be true. And they were just so incredibly vulnerable. Again, you've got a much higher social trust, much more cohesive society than the United States, and yet so utterly incompetent when it came to that Hamas attack. So you think the people who were victimized on October 7 by Hamas would have preferred to have had effective, competent uh, law enforcement officers or military, protecting them against terrorists, even if they weren't of their same tribe. Of course, you go to a music festival and expect to get raped and slaughtered. 350 people got murdered at that all-night rave in southern Israel, just a few miles outside of Gaza. Right? You think if they would have had more effective security, even if it was of a different tribe, of course everyone would want that. Okay, not quite following the direction of the chat. Right, we're in this together, guys. We're building these insights on top of each other's work. So yeah, the Osage Indians, for example, they recognized that they couldn't get it done on their own, so they kept looking to outsiders for help. And eventually, they did, that trial and effort and spending of money, eventually they found someone who can get it done. So for almost all of our problems, there's someone out there who can fix you. Right? If I'd had someone who convinced me at 18 that I could have saved a lifetime of health problems by just introducing a little meat or fish into my diet, that wouldn't matter to me what race or religion or uh, political orientation or sexual orientation. Like it could have been an Arab Muslim transsexual who is an atheist and a communist. Right? If she could have convinced me to eat a little meat or fish when I was 18, I would have saved myself a lifetime of health problems, right? If you've got car trouble and you've got an honest, effective mechanic or internet trouble or plumbing trouble, right? But you most want someone who can get the job done. I was just thinking, many, many areas of life really don't care about people's race, religion, and sexual orientation. Right? We just want them to be decent. And if we require the services, we want them to be effective. Right? Like we all have problems, and there are pretty much always people out there with solutions to our problems. And if we can just get the problem solved, we don't care about the sexual orientation of the people who can solve our problems. Right? You want a good, honest landscaper, effective landscaper, so that you don't have puddles and everything drains properly. Right? You just want them to be good at their job. I mean, my life was also crippled by ADHD. If I had someone who could have convinced me at age 15 to get tested for that, right, do you think I would have cared much if they're of a different sexual orientation, race, religion, or political opinion from me? Yeah, the good old times when Luke 4 Chat was its own entity, totally unrelated to whatever Luke 4 and these cats talked about. So, yeah, probably the most important quality for, I want to stay in the sun, most important quality for a live streamer is the ability to connect with people. And so I, I have to face that bitter truth that much of what absorbs me is of no interest to the people who watch me. And often the people who watch me aren't so much watching me, they're coming to the chat to talk to their friends about topics of interest to them, are completely unrelated to whatever it is that I'm, I'm nattering on about. So another area of life where I notice race, religion, and political and sexual orientation don't really matter much is in my various 12-step programs, like when you survive a crippling addiction, right? And get together with people at meetings who've also survived that same addiction, right? It's a sense of camaraderie that you've survived a shipwreck together. And race, religion, sexual orientation, politics just don't matter given the quality of your bond that you've survived a shipwreck together, and you've found a way to make it from the wrecked ship back to civilization. So I think this is one of the good things about the United States of America and the efficiency of the system, that you can, with enough initiative, you can get so many of your problems solved relatively efficiently, effectively in this country without some of the same barriers of unions and excessive government regulation and excessive in-group conformity that hobble other people. And so too, if I'd had people who would have pointed out the crippling nature of my emotional addictions in a way that would have been effective to me, people who pointed that out to me 40 years ago, right? I wouldn't have cared much about sexual political orientation or race or religion. If someone can do you a solid, you just don't care about those things. Get your mind. So, have you guys seen the new Scorsese film, Killers of the Flower Moon? Where you've seen the new Frontline doco on, is it Jack Teixeira, who was sharing all those secrets in a Discord server? So, the perils of the personality, right? He didn't go on that Discord server initially to share secrets. He went on the Discord server to do what we're doing right now, to have the type of conversation that it's much harder to have in real life because of various restrictions. And so people come on here or go on Discord to have more uninhibited chats, and then you start enjoying this online personality more than you enjoy your restricted and conformist real world personality. And so you start spending more and more time online, and then the people you know in the chat become increasingly important to you. And then we naturally want to advance in status, right? Think about times when you have lost status. It saps you of energy. It saps you of drive. It saps you of happiness, right? Just if your title has gone down in status, your income has gone down, your job has gone down, where you live has gone down in status, the car you drive, right? You'd have to be like incredibly spiritual to not feel a significant blow from a decrease in status. Right? We're all pretty much wired to have as high a status as possible and to avoid social public humiliation as much as possible, because it's just devastating to your energy level and your happiness level, just the quality of your life. And so when we start enjoying our online selves more than our conformist real world self, right, we want to advance in status in the online world. So you can understand why this young man who's in the, I think, US National Guard starts sharing top secret documents to promote how important he was. And while I'd like to think that none of us have shared top secret documents and stuff like these, we all do the equivalent, either through the wit and wisdom of our comments. How do we do it? We all want to advance in status. Like you get status, right, by tearing other people down, or at least like pointing out defects in their arguments and their logic and their facts. Right? This is like the sport for many of us men. Right? When I do a decoding of an individual who's of interest to my audience, right, that's the way if my decoding is relevant and accurate and important, right, that's the way that I gain status, and the person who is decoded and pointed out how he's operating out of bad faith or poor logic or poor facts, right? He drops in status. So you can see how you get excited about the online world. You start sharing things to try to make you advance in status. Like an ex-girlfriend of mine remembers when these two professors were like arguing over English literature, and she, at different times, was sleeping with each of them, and she was just tremendously entertained as they competed to show who was smarter and wiser and more knowledgeable about English literature. And she was initially sleeping with the lower status one, but she let him know that if this high status guy came by, that she was going to sleep with him. And that's exactly what she did. And then the lower status English professor, right, he just cried and cried and cried and talked to all the other of her fellow college students about what she'd done. Talk to you blokes later.